Hello and welcome to the Heat Pumps 101 with EnergySage and Green Energy Consumers Alliance. We have just let people into the webinar, so we're going to take a few minutes to let people log in. While we're doing that, my colleague E.T. is going to share 3 poll questions, and we hope you'll fill those out so that we have a better sense of who is in the room. And in just a moment, after we've done the poll, we will introduce ourselves and get started on the slides. Well, let's go ahead and share the results of the poll, E.T. So I'm seeing 47% are with Eversource in Massachusetts, plus another 29 with National Grid in Massachusetts. We have 12% of attendees today with Rhode Island, National Grid, and 6% with municipal and 6% with other. So thanks very much for that. The heating fuel, we have 59% heating with gas today and 35 with oil. 6% of you have electric. And think in your mind, distinguish in your mind, do you have an electric heat pump or do you have electric resistance heat? That's important to know when you're thinking about these slides. The vast majority, 76%, are heating with hot water or steam. So thank you for that information. 18% with hot air and 6% with other. Thanks very much. So let's introduce ourselves. I'm Moe Hayes, the Energy Efficiency Coordinator with Green Energy Consumers Alliance. My colleague Erin Taylor, or ET, is here today. ET is helping you with any technical questions you have. If you have a problem hearing or seeing the slides or any other issue like that, ET will also help us manage the question and answer session at the end. And finally, Caleb Pulliam from EnergySage. He's a heat pump advisor and we'll be answering your questions in the chat. And we're going to take questions in the Q&A slot rather than the chat, if you don't mind. Just, you can put them in either, but the Q&A is a little easier for us to follow. Let's get on with the slides. Great, so we're going to start with a little bit more on the introductions about our organizations, then heat pump basics, honing in on costs and incentives, finally design considerations, and taking your questions. We're going to move through these as quickly as possible so we have time for your questions. So Green Energy Consumers Alliance, we are a consumer-facing organization. We're out here to protect you as you're making this big transition from fossil fuel combustion to heating with high-efficiency heat pumps. This program is designed to help people find trusted vendors and sound advice. Because heat pumps is a relatively new technology for many of us, it really is difficult sometimes to know who can you trust for advice and for services. And we're hoping by educating consumers, we can move the whole heat pump industry to a higher quality level. And you can get information on our websites just using the words heat pumps. We'll get you there. EnergySage, Caleb, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more and EnergySage?
Sure, thanks, Loie. So my name is Caleb. I am one of the energy advisors here with EnergySage. We are an online home electrification marketplace where we currently service actually as of this summer, all 50 states. And our mission is similar to Green Energy Consumers Alliance, where at our core, we are consumer first. Our goal is to help empower people to switch to affordable, reliable, clean energy solutions. And when they're doing so, they're doing it with good information, trusted resources, and unbiased advice. We also offer a simplified shopping experience. So if you're in a position to compare multiple quotes, whether that's for solar or for heat pumps and other home electrification products too, like EV chargers, smart thermostats, that is kind of where we fit into the mold here. Our heat pump side of the business currently covers 5 states, in which case we're headquartered here in Massachusetts, actually in Boston. So, we can definitely speak to a high level about, contractors here, the incentive structure, et cetera, et cetera. And if you choose to, explore EnergySage, we have a ton of great blog articles. And once you sign up on the platform, you're actually able to request a consultation from an advisor, such as myself. We have a whole team of people basically just helping you navigate the buying process for home electrification products, whether that's, what prices to look for, what's a fair price, how does the technology work, how do the incentives work, and just how do we make sense of all these complex things that I need to think about. So, yeah, happy to be, with Green Energy Consumers Alliance today. We've been fortunate enough to have a partnership with this organization for quite some time now.
Yeah, I like to say we think Energy Sage is the cat's meow. They've proven that they are on the side of consumers, and they're making it a lot easier for all of us to make clean energy choices. So appreciate their partnership. So let me just briefly explain what a heat pump is. A heat pump does not create heat. A fossil fuel combustion heating system creates heat and captures it and moves it through them. There's a lot of waste in that because they can only capture so much of the heat that they create. A heat pump is like a water pump in that water pump is not creating water, it's just moving water from one place to another. A heat pump just moves heat from one, excuse me, scratchy throat. Caleb, why don't you take over?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was just glancing at the Q&A section, but yeah, as indicated here, it's the same technology that's used in your air conditioner and your refrigerator. So it's just transferring energy in and out of your home. So appearance-wise, it looks a lot like an air conditioner. There are, a couple different kinds of heat pumps. So if your house has ductwork, then you can have a heat pump that basically swaps the place of a furnace or an air conditioner. If your house lacks ductwork, they also have mini split heat pumps, so you have an indoor head in a specific zone of your house. Um, and basically, in cooling mode, so in the summertime, the refrigerant is actually going to absorb heat from the warm indoor air, and then it's going to release it outside. In heating mode, the inverse of that is happening. So in the winter months, the refrigerant that is running through the heat pump is actually absorbing heat from the air outside, which even though it could be 30, 20, 0 degrees, the air is still warmer than the refrigerant cycling through it. And it's going to release that energy inside your house through the evaporator coil. So it's basically an air conditioner that can work in both directions because it has an additional piece of equipment called an expansion valve. But let me see here. Um, yeah, I mean, and I guess in its core, that's basically how it works. And Loie, are you feeling better now?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Sorry about that. Everybody are cut up. Not contagious, just scratchy throat. Um, so Caleb, we've heard people say, "Oh, you can't get a heat pump unless you have fossil fuel backup." But the new equipment, the cold climate heat pump, is efficient to very cold temperatures. Um, can you tell us a little bit about the different configurations that these cold climate heat pumps can come in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, technology has advanced a lot in the past decade with heat pumps. So prior, heat pumps were more common in the South and the West where temperatures were more mild. And nowadays, through technological advancements, heat pumps are now able to extract energy even below 0 degrees. So a cold climate heat pump is a separate designation of heat pump technology that basically just says, this heat pump is suitable in your climate zone. So here in New England, a heat pump is still able to operate to, up to negative 12 degrees Fahrenheit in some instances. And in terms of what happens when it gets below negative 12, it doesn't happen for very often here in our climate. Of course, it can happen. We can get polar vortexes. So what happens during that scenario? The heat pump will still keep working when it gets really cold. It's gonna huff and puff. It's gonna work a lot harder. It's gonna use more electricity, and it might take longer to reach the temperature you set in your house. However, you can design around that. So if you have an airtight home that's properly insulated, it's not wasting as much energy through leaks and stuff like that. Your heat pump's not going to have to work as hard. So that's one design consideration. Another would be a backup source of heat. So sometimes contractors or people will recommend keeping a furnace as a backup. You know, you can have it on the same ductwork. That would be like a hybrid system, you know, where you're having the furnace, which is primarily natural gas or maybe oil fueled, and then your electric heat pump, kind of like a hybrid car. So it's meant to, you know, help kind of maximize cost, operational costs, and you know, just account for those times where it gets really cold. But in reality, if you want to go an all electric route, you can do that with the heat pump as well, either with just the heat pump technology, or there can be additional equipment installed on your heat pump, basically the outdoor portion. The contractor will put in a electric resistance coil. So when the heat pump part starts working, the coil will turn on via electricity, and you'll still be able to have hot air circulating through your vents. So those are a couple workarounds for our climate.
Great. Thanks so much. And we're going to be talking a lot about the ductless heat pumps. You might have heard ductless mini splits as a term, but heat pumps can also be ducted. If for those of you who do have a current hot air system, there's a potential to use that same ductwork and have the heat pump just being in the basement. Well, the condenser outside, but then the basement unit, not having the wall units in the home. So ducted or ductless. You can have a heat pump that serves your entire home or just part of your home. Say you've got a sunroom or you know, some other configuration. And you can draw the heat from the air, an air source heat pump, or from the ground, a ground source heat pump, or also called geothermal. This webinar is mostly going to be focused on ground source. No, I'm sorry. This webinar is mostly going to be focused on air source heat pumps, but we will tell you about the ground source rebates and things. Going forward, so the ductless versions, the indoor, what you would have in your home, primarily you'd have probably one of these wall hung units or multiple wall hung units. You could have a floor mounted unit, and you could have a ceiling cassette. The ceiling cassettes primarily are for places where a contractor can get into the attic and install it through the attic into the upper floor. But there are some that are designed to be installed from below. But it's obviously going to be more expensive because there's going to be some carpentry involved with that as well. The outdoor units basically look like a large suitcase. The bigger the capacity, the larger that box will be. It does need to have free flow of air. You can't like set it in bushes where it's going to get all clogged with leaves. It has to be up off the ground to prevent ice buildup in the winter. You don't want that air circulation cut off by a coating of ice. And there will be a refrigerant line that connects from this outdoor unit to the indoor unit. You can see here that it's covered with what we call a line hide, and that can be made to match the color of the house, you know, potentially. You want to make sure you don't put it underneath an awning roof line where there's traditionally a lot of big icicles or snow runoff where you have a large thing of ice crashing down on your machine. So those are some considerations. Why do we care about heat pumps? It's all about the greenhouse gas emissions. So with our traditional heating equipment, the fossil fuel equipment, oil, propane, and gas, there's a high degree of greenhouse gases that are being released. With our current electrical grid, and this number is from, I think 2021 from the Mass Clean Energy Center, but it's basically similar today. Electric baseboard is up here with the fossil fuels because, there's so much fossil fuels needed to create the electricity. But even with today's current electric grid, the emissions from electric air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps are much lower because they operate so efficiently. Now, when we get to 100% clean electricity from our grid, the emissions from those electric heating sources will be zero, and will still, if you're using fossil fuels, you would still be putting out a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. And you can get 100% clean electricity already today and make your heating zero emissions through either a municipal program, through a program like our own Green Powered, or other options. So this is, why we care about heat pumps. This is why there are big incentives from both of our states, Rhode Island as well as Massachusetts, to install, to convert to a high efficiency electric heat. Let's hone in on the costs and incentives. Now remember, these are very rough ballpark numbers, but for a single head ductless system, say you have that great room or that sunroom that needs some extra heat, you're looking at $6,000 to $10,000 for the installation cost. For a centrally ducted or a whole home ductless system, you're looking at least $15,000 to $25,000. It can be greater than that. I just got a quote for my apartment, and it was $20,000. It's a 1,250 square foot apartment for $20,000, and that's really kind of the middle of the ballpark. You can think of it as roughly comparable to the cost of installing both a fossil fuel heating system and a central air system, and that's because heat pumps provide both cooling as well as heating. An additional cost might be an electrical service upgrade. Oftentimes, the heat pump programs suggest that you may need a 200 amp service. You can think of that as 200 amp service would be sufficient to run everything in your home that currently runs on fossil fuels, including your car, to be powered by your electricity. It may be possible for you to get away with installing a heat pump without an electrical service upgrade. It all depends on what else you've got on the circuits and how you can control those different turn-on times. Now, there are a couple of loan programs that can help with the installation costs. The heat loan is active in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. It's a 0% loan, and it's up to $50,000 now in Massachusetts. I believe it's only 25 in Rhode Island, but we can check on that if anybody has that specific question. There's also a new low interest loan program for moderate income households. That's up to 165% of, I believe it's state median income. Yeah, state median income. It's about $190,000. So if your household income is at or below that, you might qualify for a low interest loan from the Mass Community Climate Bank of up to $100,000. So you can see there's a lot of funding that's available, and that's just loan programs. Now we're going to talk about the incentive programs. So important to remember, incentives vary by household income. Now, here's an example of a two-person household in Cambridge, Massachusetts. A low-income household in this instance would be defined as $59,360 or less than that. In this instance, ABCD would completely cover the cost of a heat pump installation if, following their analysis, they felt that it was appropriate for this home to be converted. They don't want to put in a heat pump into your home if, say, your home is going to be way, has such a huge heat load that it's going to be difficult to manage in a cost-effective way for you. They don't want your costs to increase. For a moderate income household, for this two-person household in Cambridge, that's defined as $59,360 to $104,200. This is this household would qualify for a Mass Save enhanced incentive of about 16,000, of exactly 16,000 per apartment or home. Now, remember, when I say per apartment, that means if you're a landlord and you're converting 2 units, you'll get 16,000 for each unit that qualified for this enhanced incentive. Ditto with the market rate program, that is per apartment or per home. This is for households, in this case, a two-person household in Cambridge, with income greater than $104,200. And the incentive for that home is $10,000. So you can see how it varies depending on your income level. So just drilling down a little bit on what we're talking about with the whole home incentive, that's if you're completely replacing your fossil fuel heating system with a heat pump, the fossil fuel system has to be disconnected. The thermostat, you won't be able to spin it and have the fossil fuel come on. It is $10,000, and that is regardless of the system size. So if you have a small home or apartment, that $10,000 could be a very significant portion of the total cost. In the instance that I talked about with my home, a $20,000 quote means that the $10,000 would pay for half of the cost of the system. And this is just the Mass Save rebate. We're going to talk a minute on tax credits that would further subsidize the cost. So you do need to get a home energy assessment first, and you do need to weatherize. If that home energy assessment says, oh, we can put some more insulation in your attic, you do need to go ahead and do that, or you won't qualify for the whole home rebate. Now, you can get incentives and still keep your fossil fuel system as your backup. This is called a partial system. And it is depending on the size of the system. It can go up to $10,000, but it's unlikely that it would, because it's based on your BTUs, the size of the system that you're putting in. Most homes, in my apartment, because it's relatively small, we might need just 2.5 tons of heating capacity. And the incentive is $1,250 per ton. Some, larger homes might need more heating. It depends on what your heat load is calculated to be. Now, if you do have a partial system, you will most likely need an integrated control. That is a thermostat that's connected to both systems and says, at this temperature, I'm going to run this system. When the temperature drops to this point, then I'm going to turn on the fossil fuel backup and turn off the heat pump. The technician will set that switchover point. You'll be able to discuss that with them, but a lot that's determined by the energy efficiency program, what that switchover point is, and it's often around 32 degrees. Now, we did mention the ground source, also known as geothermal heat pumps. There is a larger rebate for those, $15,000. And that's because it's a more expensive installation process. You basically have to get a well driller equipment onto your property. You can think of the access being like at least 2 driveways wide at a minimum, I think, 20 feet wide to be able to get onto the property. And I think they need maybe 50 feet deep for their operations. It is more efficient than an air source heat pump. So if this is an option for you, if you have a large enough site where they can get the equipment in, and if you have the right soils, they'll have to determine if your property has the right soils for them to effectively use geothermal, then it's definitely a good thing to consider. Now, I know a lot of you heat with hot water or steam. You have a hydronic system. We call that a hydronic system. And there are hydronic heat pumps, also known as air to water heat pumps. And there is a $10,000 rebate for those as well if you're replacing the whole fossil fuel system. But it's not a one-for-one replacement. Your current boiler produces very hot water or steam, and your radiators are all, and your baseboard is all sized to get enough heat out of that very hot water or steam to keep your home warm during the winter. If you put a cooler water through all those baseboards and radiators, you wouldn't necessarily stay warm enough. So the hydronic heat pumps at present are not capable of matching the temperature that your boiler is able to produce. If you have radiant flooring, that uses a lower temperature, or if you're able to install radiant flooring, that uses a lower temperature. If you can add radiant floor wall panels, that also can use a lower temperature. But remember, there are very few experienced installers in our states. So if you want to go this route, you would really be cutting edge. You'd be breaking the trail for all of us, and it would take more time and likely more money. So just to touch briefly on Rhode Island's incentives, they are also very strong. There's a program called Clean Heat Rhode Island, and that offers significant incentives, and it is matched by whichever utility you use as well. That's the Clean Heat Rhode Island program is for people who don't have electric resistance heat, but if you do have electric resistance heating, you can get an incentive that virtually matches the Clean Heat Rhode Island through Rhode Island Energy, assuming that you have Rhode Island Energy. I want to touch briefly on heat pump water heaters because some of you probably heat your domestic hot water from your boiler. And so you would need to figure out your option of what you're going to do for heating your hot water. There are heat pump hot water heaters, and there are rebates in both states. In Massachusetts, it's through your contractor. The heat pump water heaters are 3 times more efficient, 2 to 3 times more efficient than electric resistance tanks. So if you have currently an electric resistance tank, your next heat pump, your next water heater should definitely be a heat pump water heater. They do need adequate space for air exchange. You can't put them in a little utility closet. And generally at this point, they do need a dedicated 240-volt circuit. There are some plug-in models. They are not really very proven here in the Northeast, where the temperature of the intake water is extremely cold. They are being installed in Europe and in California, other warmer places, the plug-in heat pump water heaters, but not so much here. You can get them. So again, you could be the cutting edge person. It will need a place to drain off condensate fluid that it's pulling out of the air. As it pulls that warm air through its system, it's going to be condensing some of the moisture out of that air. It's going to make the space cooler and drier, which in some cases is great for your basement. But again, if it's a conditioned basement, if you have some living area in the basement, you need to consider that with your contractor, how you're going to deal with the fact that that air is now colder. And there is an interesting calculator on the efficiencymain.com website that helps you calculate your cost of a heat pump water heater versus other things. And you can plug in your own particular utility costs, which is very helpful. Now, I mentioned the tax credit earlier. If you're installing either a heat pump or a heat pump water heater, you can write off after you've subtracted the incentive. So again, in the example of my home, $20,000 is the upfront cost of the system that they're recommending. $10,000 would be the whole home incentive. I can then write off 30% of that $10,000 against my taxes. And if I don't have that tax liability in the first year, I can use it up over year after year. It's up to $2,000 is the max that you can write off for either a heat pump or a heat pump water heater. There are tax credits also for electrical upgrades. If you're installing heat pumps or heat pump water heaters and you need to make some change to your wiring to support that, there's a small credit for that. There are smaller tax credits for other measures for electrification as well. The I'm sorry, I just said that you could roll over the heat pump tax credit. No, I was thinking of solar. I'm sorry. You can roll over solar. You can't roll over heat pumps. Correct me if I'm wrong, Caitlin. I think you can roll over solar.
Yeah, you can
Anyway,
roll over the solar one, not the tax credit. I mean, the heat pump one.
yeah, apologies for the misinformation. You cannot roll over that tax credit for the heat pumps or the heat pump water heaters. So 2,000 is the max that you're ever going to claim on that. But there are tax credits for these other things, and you can do a new thing every year for the next 10 years and claim an energy efficiency tax credit every year you install a new measure. Now, there are IRA rebates coming, and we think they're coming to our states in 2024, but we don't know. In Massachusetts, there is a website on the DOER website where you can put in your email address and you'll get updates. I know of nothing comparable in Rhode Island, but that's still pretty tentative. Just to give you a rough sense of what's coming, there are two types. One is HER, home efficiency rebates, and that is for all income levels, and it's going to be based on projected energy savings. So if you're interested in this, you'll need to work with an energy modeler, somebody who can come in, take all the measurements of your home's current energy use, and then project how much the heat pump or the other things that you're going to do is going to reduce your total energy usage, and that will determine what your incentive will be. Now, the second set of electrification rebates that are coming from the Inflation Reduction Act uses the acronym HERE, Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate. This is specifically for moderate and low income households. And in this instance, they define moderate income as 150% of area median income. Now in the Boston area, Metro Boston area, 150% of area median income is 200,000 for a 3-person household, just to give you some ballpark. In Providence, it's 143,000 for a 3-person household. And the HERE rebates will be based on the specific measures you install, and you can pile up all of those measures in 1 year. So if you're planning on doing a major renovation and you qualify for this less than 150% of area median income, then this might be a very good thing for you. You can combine heat pumps, water heaters, stoves, electric stoves, all sorts of things, and accrue an additional rebate for each of those things. The states are still working out the details of those plans, and they have to submit those plans to the federal government, and the federal government has to approve them before the funds can be released, and a portal can be made public for you to apply for those. So don't hold your breath. If you have something that needs to be replaced, do that now. But if you have something that's working now, you might consider waiting if you think you'll qualify for either of these, the lower moderate income one or the one that's based on energy modeling, then you might want to wait. Now, that's all been talking about how to lower your installation costs. We want to also address very directly your operating costs, because in some instances, installing a heat pump could increase your winter heating costs. So there are 3 factors that affect whether or not your operating costs will be higher or lower. One is the efficiency of the equipment. You definitely need to buy cold climate, high efficiency heat pump equipment. You will not be saving money if you install something that was made for Alabama or for California. So a cold climate heat pump is what you want. And there are a variety of efficiency levels within that. The second is the temperature that it's operating at. Now, this chart here shows 10 years of heating season data for New England, all averaged together. And you see the majority of the hours, this is the hours, and this is the temperature. The majority of the hours, the highest number of hours during the heating system occur when the temperature is between 30 and 60 degrees. About 20 or so percent of the heating season is below 30 degrees. And that's important to know because some heating systems, some cold climate heat pumps have what we call a capacity drop, meaning they struggle much harder at the lower temperatures. Some are just fine down to -15. So you really want to know the difference between those systems. And just briefly, the term we use to measure the efficiency of a heat pump is called coefficient of performance. And that's basically how much heat you can create out of how many kilowatts that are being put in. So let's use that same weather data. This is in the gray screen, you see that same weather data. And we're now going to add in the fuel cost. This is the annual cost of energy at different temperatures. And this shows the fuel cost that we've used to create this data. For instance, electricity, 30 cents per kilowatt hour. And that's your combined supply and delivery costs. And these different color bands show the different fuels. This large blue band is gas, and the green is your air source heat pump. And you see at the warmer temperatures, the air source heat pump is less expensive to operate than the gas is. But when you switch over to below freezing, the gas is sometimes less expensive than the air source heat pump. And again, it all depends on the efficiency of the equipment. We've assumed in this a fairly high efficient heat pump, but there's certainly you can get one that's very efficient. The oil, the propane, those are going to be much more costly until you get down into the really the teens, and then possibly some winters, depending again on the price that the fossil fuel is selling at that winter. So remember that having your own solar array could reduce your electric costs. Community aggregations can sometimes reduce your electric costs. And for all these fuel systems, all these different fuels, unforeseen geopolitical or technological changes can greatly alter the results of this chart. Like, for instance, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the cost of gas went up, and that meant the cost of electricity went up because so much of our electricity in New England is still produced from gas turbines. So that's a little bit about operating costs. Generally, we say if you have propane or oil or electric resistance, those are all going to be very good bets that switching to a cold climate heat pump will save you money. If you have gas, it's more of a toss-up, and it really depends on the efficiency of your current gas system, the efficiency of the heat pump equipment you're looking at, and geopolitical forces, and whether or not you have a good aggregation rate, or perhaps if you have a municipal power company, you have a low electric rate, much lower than this 30 cents per kilowatt hour. So for gas, it really is more of a question. Heat pump design options. So just to recap, if your home currently has ductwork and a good percentage of you have furnaces instead of boilers, that means you have hot air ductwork, and there's a relatively easy replacement of a hot air fossil fuel system with a centrally ducted heat pump. You could also switch to a ductless system. What you do need to have the technician check is whether that hot air system could also transmit cold air, or if there's going to be a problem with condensation or some other issue. Now, if you have a boiler, but you have central air conditioning, you may be able to change that central air conditioning over to a heat pump. Again, that's often a relatively easy replacement. But again, some central air ductwork is too small to provide the heat that you would need. Hot air takes up more cubic inches than cold air does. And in all cases, the ductwork has to be in good condition. If it's old and in need of service, you may not be able to use it. Now, if you lack ductwork, so you have a boiler and you don't have central air conditioning, remember, a heat pump does not produce hot enough water to easily replace your boiler. But so we talked about an air to water, and you could be breaking the trail on the air to water systems and adding radiant paneling, etc. That's a possibility. But for most people, you're going to think about a ducted or mini ducted heat pump system. You could have a single head serving a large open area. You could have single zone or multi-zone systems, and a mini ducted system is where one of the indoor heads has very short ductworks to serve adjacent small rooms. So say you have an attic or a basement where you can have an air handler that then has, a less than 6 foot ductwork to reach different rooms. That's what we call a mini ducted, and that less than 6 feet is, I'm just tossing that out as a for instance. And here are a few specific examples using this sketch of a 2-bedroom apartment with a large open common area for your living room, dining room, and kitchen. And we're going to presume that this apartment has a heat load of 24,000 BTUs per hour. That's how a heat load is expressed in that type of figure. And in this illustration, the design is to put 124,000 BTU head in the living room. You can think of this as similar to an old-fashioned parlor stove or a wood stove. The living area is going to be toasty warm. It's going to be nice and cool in summer. The bedrooms are going to be cooler in winter and warmer in summer. But the 12,000 BTU unit will keep all the pipes, keep everything from freezing, etc. It will be enough. This might be particularly useful for somebody who's thinking of a partial displacement. And if you were doing a partial displacement, you could perhaps put a 12,000 BTU head in the living area and then have the bedrooms heated off of your legacy oil, gas, or propane system. Now, a second instance, same illustration. This is a do not do this illustration. In this instance, you'll see each room has a 9,000 BTU head in it, and that leads to a total of 36,000 BTUs as its maximum capacity. That's a third more than what you actually need. And the problem is having too much equipment is going to result in it being too expensive and not necessarily being comfortable enough. Heat pump systems are designed to run continuously, kind of like a flywheel. Is very efficient because once it gets going, it just keeps going, and you need to put hardly any energy to keep it moving. And that's where the efficiency of a heat pump really comes in, is if it doesn't have to turn off and turn on all the time. When you turn it off and on, that's where you're using a lot more energy. It's inefficient. Also in the summer, the dehumidification is a much slower process than the cooling process. And so you can end up feeling it gets cold enough, the heat pumps shut off, and you're still left with clammy air because it hasn't been adequately dehumidified. Here's what we're calling the perfect mix. It's got a ductless and a mini ducted system. Both of these are sized to 12,000 BTUs. The living room stays a nice temperature. It never overheats. It can glide at that perfect temperature without a lot of energy being used. And the bedrooms are small enough that they're fine with 6,000 BTUs per, where you've got a head that's installed either in the attic or the basement and short duct runs into each of the bedrooms. These two units could be connected to two separate condensers or to only one. The heads can be up to 150 feet from the condenser, so you've got a lot of flexibility there. I'm going to wrap up soon, but just to recap, next steps for your heat pump research, we highly recommend getting a virtual independent consultation at no cost through your local energy efficiency program, MassSave for many Massachusetts communities, Clean Heat for Rhode Island for anyone in Rhode Island. If you have a muni power company in one of these communities, you can also get a free independent virtual consultation with a heat pump expert. And EnergySage provides virtual independent consultations to anyone in this area and in the 5 states that they serve. We recommend that you get 3 quotes. Once you get down to choosing your installers that you want to talk with, get 3 quotes. Don't settle for one, because you could get 3 heat pump installers in and they'll be selling different types of equipment, and that equipment will have different attributes and different advantages and disadvantages. Not to mention that the different companies have different business models, and some will be, higher in service and higher in price. Some will be lower in service and lower in price, and you have to find which are the ones you want to trust. Will be around if you need to call them if the equipment is not working well. So questions to ask heat pump installers. These are just 3 really important ones, and there's a great list of questions that I can send you as well. We'll include that in the follow-up email. So number 1, is your company one of the approved installers from my state or municipal heat pump program? There are a lot of companies out there. You want to make sure they have that basic certification and experience with the local rebate program. How many rebates have they submitted, or what type of support do they give the consumer in filling out the rebate forms? Some companies will handle it all for you. Others will say, good luck, be sure to file your rebate. Ask them, will you formally calculate my heat load before I sign a contract to purchase specific pieces of equipment? Now, calculating a heat load takes some time, and some companies want to estimate that, and you may feel, I trust this company, I trust their estimate, they've talked me through it, that's fine with me. But you want to know that they are actually thinking about your heat load and whether you need 24,000 or 36,000 or 48,000 BTUs is a matter of debate, unless somebody has actually taken measurements and looked at how many windows you have and the quality of those windows and the quality of your insulation, et cetera, to come up with what they think that number is. So you want to feel confident in their heat load estimation or calculation. And is the equipment that you're recommending eligible for the local rebates? You don't want somebody saying, oh yeah, we install these all the time to people in your neighborhood. But then to find out, oh, they actually are installing a piece of equipment that's not qualified, that's not efficient enough to qualify for the state municipal rebate. So you want to find out that. So those are just some precautions. And let me turn this over to Caleb to talk about the heat pump marketplace that you can access for free through EnergySage.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Loie. For starters, yeah, this presentation is a fantastic overview if you're new to heat pumps, and definitely, at EnergySage we're used to using these resources from the Green Energy Consumers Alliance. But basically, how it works through our marketplace is, we'll include all this information in our follow-up as well, including the link and so on and so forth. But once you head over to our clean heating and cooling page, you're just going to enter some basic questions like your zip code, do you own the house, and then a couple details about the house. It doesn't take more than 5 minutes generally, and from there, you are, once you're a qualified client that we can help, meaning you're in a service territory that we have coverage. And of course, you own the home, you're not renting it, and so on and so forth. You're able to schedule free consultations from our list of installers. These installers that we work with for both solar and heat pumps, they do have to go through our vetting process and a background check. So at a minimum, they have to be in business X number of years. They have to be licensed and certified. And then on top of that, for heat pumps, we do look at things like, for in Massachusetts, they have to be Mass Safe certified. And we also take a look at what product partnerships they have. So are they a Mitsubishi Diamond contractor? Are they a Fujitsu Elite contractor? All those things. So we're a little bit more selective about who we work with. And you can choose when and how you want to be contacted. So you'll get the list of contractors, you'll get a rough estimate for your project, and you can schedule as few or as many consults as you like. Like Loie said, I generally recommend people get around 3 estimates. And then from there, you'll have access to the advisor throughout the whole process. So right when you sign up to before you get quotes to after you get quotes, then you're able to compare and save. So you can either, schedule a 15, a 30-minute consult with myself or one of my colleagues. If you prefer email outreach or texting, we try to be as accommodating as possible. And like I said earlier in the chat, we're no cost to a homeowner. Rather, we get our funding from a mixture of sources. One would be our parent company, Schneider Electric, through the Department of Energy, and also through our contractor network. We're ultimately billing them to use our platform and our services.
Great.
And then,
A little bit
yeah,
about your role as an energy advisor.
Yeah, for sure. So just a little bit more about what the Energy Advisor entails. You're going to get different quotes with different equipment options and system sizes. So we're basically here to kind of make sense of all the estimates. A lot of heat pump quotes are formatted in different ways. They're going to include different scopes of work. So it's confusing. We try to help you get all your cards on the table, give you a simplified view of the quotes, so they're all going to appear as the same format. Ideally, it's with one of our vendors, but we do have people who bring us quotes from external sources as well. Maybe it's someone who used to deliver your oil and they give you a quote for a heat pump or something like that. So we can upload that to your platform. It should appear the same. And then we just kind of use common comparison metrics to help you compare the quotes. And then, we're here for continued support as well. So even, pre or post installation of the heat pump at any point, if there's still questions, if there's still communication hangups, you can always reach back out to us as a resource, either for solar, for heat pumps, etc.
Yeah, I can't speak highly enough about that. Getting a side-by-side comparison of the quotes in matching format, it makes it so much easier to understand because each contractor, of course, has their own template providing quotes, and the information that's provided is sometimes not complete or it's difficult to interpret. And so that service is just really stellar. And of course, having somebody who you can talk with and say, I'm liking A, I'm concerned about C, and they have no stake in whether you take A or C, or take
Exactly.
any of them at all.
Yep. So like you said, our role is purely consultative. We're not in a position to sell you on something that you're not comfortable with. I'm of the position that heat pumps, it's going to be a transition. You need to do your research, and there are other factors that go into it. It's not always a one-to-one swap from a furnace to a heat pump. You want to make sure that your house is optimized, that you're getting the proper energy assessments. Contractors are running load calculations, and sometimes that it might be a longer process. So yeah, that's kind of what we're here to do.
Great. We've run out of time, but you'll see there is a QR code when you get these slides. And We do have more webinars coming up. You can always find our webinars on YouTube as well, our recordings. We are a nonprofit. We welcome your donations, and we're happy to take your questions now and in follow-up as well. Kayla, can you hang for 15 more minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually do have a call at 1:05, so I'm a little bit limited, but we've been trying to answer the questions in the Q&A as much as possible. I do see one lingering one though. Maybe we want to, if we
Yeah,
have time to.
go ahead.
Sure. So the question from Karen is, since I need to have a secondary system, would I likely need a lower grade oil boiler if we install a heat pump system? And yeah, Chloe, do you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, people don't necessarily need a secondary system at all. You can get a heat pump that provides 100% of your needs. So I'm not sure why Karen assumes that.
Maybe I guess for maybe if someone wants to keep a boiler for water heating purposes, do you have any advice for people like that are, if they're retiring a boiler, but they also need to get a new hot water heater? I know we brushed on heat pump water heaters a bit, but any advice for those sorts of people?
You would need to check. My system is ductless. I thought I needed a second system. No, oh, I see. So you have a boiler,
Mhm.
and you thought you needed a second system. No, um, you can switch to a ductless system, a ductless heat pump that would provide 100% of your heat. You would not need to keep your boiler working. Now, if your boiler does provide your hot water, your domestic hot water for your showers and dishwasher, etc., I believe that you can allow the boiler to continue to serve that purpose,
Mhm.
but it would no longer be connected to your thermostat to provide to your radiators and baseboard. Um, uh, so yeah, you don't need a secondary system to provide your space heating, but you do need something to provide your hot water, and that could be a standalone tank, or possibly you can continue to use your boiler. And how do we feel about the Mass Save requirement to disconnect your fossil fuel heat source? I'm worried about power outages and also being stuck if my system does not perform as well as promised in extreme temps. Um, I believe that they made the change because they wanted to reinforce the understanding that heat pumps are proven to be able to provide 100% of your heating needs, even in extreme temperatures. That heat pump uh, 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 technicians can design systems to provide heat, adequate heat in extreme temperatures. So that being stuck is, yes, something that we've been wondering about, but it's pretty much proven itself over the last, 2 years ago. We had some really extreme polar vortexes, and the reports from all the heat pump users out there who had good systems, they had perfectly fine heat. So I think that that's been resolved. Now, your question about, you mentioned power outages, and you should understand that all the fossil fuel systems now require electricity to operate. So when there's a power outage, your oil, propane, and natural gas heating systems will shut down. They will not be operable. And in a power outage, you can rely on power generators. A lot of people have, small portable diesel generators, or propane generators, or electric battery backup. Some people are installing battery walls
Mhm.
to provide heat for your appliances and potentially for your heat during power outages. That's another option. Some people just have a wood stove if their home traditionally has a working fireplace, you can have a wood stove be your heating backup for power outages. So yeah.
Yeah, a mixture of like generator options. And, since an electric heat pump, if it's the dead of winter and there's a blackout, you could potentially, I think a more energy effective use would be to have a couple oil-filled space heater plugins. That might be a better option than just running the heat pump at full capacity. And also, if you're curious about batteries too, we do have a lot of resources about that. Like if you're signing up for a solar quote, you can opt in for a battery option, and a lot of models nowadays, yes, they are capable of starting an AC or a heat pump compressor. It might not be able to sustain it for that long, but it is going to give you a little bit more resiliency than not having anything. But of course, a battery is a higher upfront cost than a generator. But yeah, I'll save that spiel unless anyone else is interested.
I wanted to jump in because I know it's 104, but there are a couple questions that Caleb answered. All the questions, if you click Q&A, you can click answered, and a lot of these have been answered by Caleb already. But I think there are two that we might benefit answering live. And one of them is, what are the expiration dates for varying incentives? And specifically, this person asked about the $12.50 per ton incentive. But also maybe we could talk about any special expirations for incentives.
I can address that briefly. Almost always you'll see an incentive listed as good only through the current year, but that is almost always extended to the next year. And in fact, both states, Rhode Island and Massachusetts, have very strong mandates under law to reduce emissions, and that includes emissions from the heating sector, from the home heating sector. And they have very ambitious goals in order to reach those greenhouse gas reduction goals. They have very ambitious goals for the number of heat pumps that they will be installing. And they are not yet meeting that ambitious speed of installing heat pumps. So they are not going to be reducing the incentives that they offer for heat pumps through the state utility programs, utility run programs. Now the munis may be more variable. So I'll defer on that or follow up with you afterwards if you're asking specifically about a muni rebate. But you can assume that the Clean Heat Rhode Island and Mass Save rebates will continue into the next year without any decrease. In fact, there's a possibility they could be increased. And we know that there are going to be federal rebate monies that are eventually released, if not in 2024, then in 2025. So we expect there will be increasing rebates, not reducing rebates.
Yep, and that $2,000 tax credit is good till 2032 as well. But I do have to hop for a advising session. So just want to say, Loie, ET, always a pleasure to join. And for folks that stuck around, really appreciate you guys chiming in. Great questions. And yeah, hopefully if anyone's interested in exploring their options, like maybe we can talk again one day. And hope everyone else has a wonderful June, wonderful summer, wonderful Pride Month, and talk to you later.
Thank you so much, Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb.
ET, were there any other questions that you thought we should answer?
Yeah, so there's two that I can answer real quick and one that I will give to you. It was asked if using the EnergySage platform is free, and the answer is yes. And then people also asked for the link to that, which I put in the chat. But if you go through greenenergyconsumers.org/heat pumps and you click on find installers, you will be able to select EnergySage and go there. And we'd love it if you take that path, because if you do wind up installing a heat pump through that path and through an EnergySage referred installer, Green Energy Consumers may get a small kickback that we put toward our nonprofit mission. So just keep that in mind and follow the link you see on the screen to get to EnergySage. We'd love that. But the other one I wanted to put to you, Loie, which Caleb also answered, is given that a majority of respondents use a water-based heating system, What is your take on commercially available systems that reuse or retrofit baseboards? And can you comment on trends? And Caleb's response was, there are air to water heat pumps that can potentially use your radiant floor heating system, but it's hard to find contractors who offer this. Likely it's 5 years out from hitting the mass market here in the Northeast. So Loie, anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I had a really interesting conversation with a company that does install the air to water systems. And I'll mention the company, Arctic. I believe it's Arctic heat pumps, maybe Arctic Air. They do have a high temperature heat pump. It's a cascading system where they actually have two condensers using two different types of refrigerant, and one gets it up to the low temp, and then it runs the refrigerant over to the second one, and that gets it up to the high temp. And that would be, for the next 6 months, an option. And I qualify that because on January 1st, the US is moving toward refrigerants that have a lower global warming potential. So right now, if the refrigerant gets out into the atmosphere, it really wreaks havoc with our climate. And that's why you need a very, you want to make sure you're using a qualified installer, because you don't want to have any leaks of the refrigerant. Also, it means your system won't work well. So there's going to be a new refrigerant requirement in January 1st, and that Arctic cascading high temperature boiler replacement, air to water heat pump, is only going to be for sale in the United States until January 1 or until December 31st. So it's worth exploring if you're ready to move right away. But I have to caveat, I have to give you a warning that they haven't sold a great number of these because it's taken so long to get them approved through the approval process. There's a relatively small number that have been installed, and they're not going to be able to install more of them. They're widely used in Europe and Australia. I'm not sure where else. So the parts will be available, but if God forbid you needed some repair, but they might have to order the parts, individually from Europe, and then have the cost and the time delay of getting the part back to the US to you. So I'll leave that to you, and I'm happy to follow up if anybody has specific questions about that, and I can make a referral to the specific person at Arctic with whom I spoke, if you want to get more details on that.
Thanks, Loie. I myself have to jet to pick up my kids from school, but
Okay.
if you want to stay on and answer more questions.
No, I think we should probably wrap up. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.